Welcome to Saxon Math Course 3, Lesson 95, Slant Heights of Pyramids and Cones. Now, before we get started, just some background information. This is a pyramid. This is a cone. The pointy bit at the top of the pyramid or the cone, the very tip top, is called the apex. Now, the bottom, the circle in the cone, the square, triangle, or any other shape in the pyramid, it's called the base. It's the very bottom. Now, there is a vertical line going from the apex straight down to the base, which we call the height. This is the normal height. Now, during today's lesson, I'm going to be referring to the word cross-section. Now, a cross-section is what you would get if you took this shape and you cut it right down through the apex along the height, straight through the middle. So it's not on the side, it's not on the edge, it's straight through the middle. If we cut this pyramid straight through the middle in a cross section, we would get a triangle that looks like this, where we could see the height, the apex, the base at the bottom, which would have the same length as the edge of the base, and we'd have the side of the shape here. The side of this triangle would go from about here on the pyramid up to the apex along the edge. Now, going along the edge of the pyramid up the apex, it's almost like what you'd get if you took a sled and you went up to the top of the pyramid and you slid straight down the side. That is called the slant height. Now notice the height itself is perpendicular. It has this right angle at the bottom. The slant height is slanted. Now, you can see that this is a triangle, and because the height forms a right angle, this right here is a right triangle. That's pretty important because since we know it's a right triangle, if we have the base, the height, and the slant height, then we can use the Pythagorean theorem to find one of them as long as we're given two of the others. So, let's look at how that would work. So how to find slant height? We're going to use the base and the height in the Pythagorean theorem to find the slant height. Now, I made a little drawing right here that I want to go over with you guys. Remember, the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, we could say that a is our height. It's the amount going up right here. But notice, b is not the full base. b is not the full base. It's only half of it. There are two b's. There's the left-hand side and the right-hand side that each go with a different side of the pyramid. So whatever you're given as the base, you might need to divide it by 2. Similarly, with a cone, if you're given the diameter, you'll need to find the radius. If they give you the radius is already from the center to the side. So the radius would fit in as b. The diameter would be the 2b. Now, we're going to take our height, we're going to square it, we're going to take our base divided by 2, square that, and we're going to take our slant height and square it, and then we're just going to solve for whatever is missing in our equation. Now, we've already had a whole lesson on solving equations that have exponents of 2, so we know that the way we're going to do that is by using a square root at the last step. I'm going to show you the first example now. Example 1 says calculate the slant height of the cone. Now, this cone here had a diameter of 10, which means that its base is a 5 and a 5 for its radius. It has a height of 12, and we're looking for the slant height. So we're going to plug in our a and our b. 5 squared plus 12 squared will equal c squared. 5 squared, that one's pretty easy. 5 times 5 is 25. 12 squared is 144. If you don't have these memorized, write the multiplication out. If you do have them memorized, good. You're going to need to know these ones. Have every perfect square between 1 and 12 memorized. 25 plus 144, 5 plus 4 is 9, 2 plus 4 is 6, and 100 is 100, so 169. To get from c squared to c, we're going to need to take the square root of both sides, which would give us plus or minus 13. But since we're talking about a distance on a shape, it's just going to give us 13. No plus or minus about it. So the slant height is 13. That's example 1. Example 2 says, Arman is building a model of the Great Pyramid to approximate proportions. The base of the pyramid will be a square 30 centimeters on each side. He wants the height to be 20 centimeters. What should the slant height be? Sketch a net of the pyramid. So first off, here's a triangle with a height of 20 and a base of 30. Notice the base of 30 is the whole thing. We need to split that in half. Half of 30 is 15, so we're going to have a 15, a 15, and a 20. So we're going to have 15 squared plus 20 squared equals c squared. 15 squared we've seen a couple of times in class. It's 225. I'll do the math over here just in case. You need to see it worked out. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 1 plus 2 is 7. 1 times 15 is going to be a 5 and a 1. Added is 5, 12, and 2, giving us 225. 20 squared is 400. That one we all have memorized, I'm pretty sure. Also, it's 2 and 10. 2 squared is 4. 10 squared is 100. 400. This is going to give us 625. Now, if we didn't know the square root of 625, what we would do first is we would write a factor tree. You might know the square root of 625. If you do, write it here. We're taking the square root of this on both sides. 625, you can know, well, it ends in 5, so it probably is divisible by 5. 5 would go into 6 one time, leaving you with 12, which would go in twice as 10, leaving you with 25, which is 5. Well, 125, that's 5 times 25. Now, when we get to this step, we could continue going on in 5 and 5. But no, 25 is 5 times 5. So that means 625 is 25 times 25. So the square root of this is just 25. That means our slant height is 25. And that's going to be important when we're drawing our net. Now I'm going to use a straight edge over here. First, you should draw your base. The base on this is a square, so we're going to draw a square. It's a little bit easier for me because I've got graph paper. If you don't have graph paper for your notebook, that's okay. This has a base of 30 by 30 by 30 by 30. Since we're sketching it, if you don't have something showing that it's all the same shape, just write the same number in all of them. Then we need to know, in our slant height, where does it go in the net? We found the slant height, we know how much it is, but where would we write it? Well, remember that when we're drawing a net, we're drawing the folded out sides, and the slant height goes from the base to the apex along the sides. With this little net here of this pyramid, the apex is the pointy bit of the triangles that is not touching the square. So the slant height goes from the edge of the base to the apex. And it's going to form a right angle here. And it's 25. I'm going to write it in two places, here and here, and 25 right down here. Just so you all know that when we're drawing nets, we should label all of our dimensions. This would be sketching the net after finding the slant height. Alright, those are the two examples for today's lesson. It's mainly just looking at the picture, looking at the information, drawing these triangles, and putting the information you have into the Pythagorean theorem correctly. From that point, it's just being able to solve the Pythagorean theorem. I've told you once, I'll tell you 100 more times. You must be able to solve the Pythagorean theorem. It's going to keep coming up again and again throughout your entire middle school and high school educational careers. Get good at it. If you're good at the Pythagorean theorem, you'll do really well in geometry. Alright, Have a wonderful day. Check out the practice set and the starred problems and do your homework. Make sure that after today's lesson, since this is lesson 95, I'm going to be uploading a assignment for you to turn in your notes for a notebook check. You should have lessons 91, 92, 93, 94, and 95 in that assignment. Each one of those lessons is going to be worth 15 points, so more than half of a homework. So get them done. It's going to be open on Friday and it will close on Monday at midnight. So, if for some reason you cannot finish taking your notes over the weekend, you still have Monday to do it. But be proactive, get things done. All right, stay safe, do your homework, and wash your hands.